Right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter this illusion of the perfect neutral machine and investigate how AI actually mirrors human society. We are looking at artificial intelligence through a totally different lens, not just digging through lines of code, but actually using literary theory and some really fascinating live experimentation. We naturally assume that a machine calculating algorithms is completely objective. It's just math and data, right? Actually, scratch that. It's never just math. Today's live experiment is going to prove exactly why that is a dangerous assumption. AI is built entirely on data generated by us, which means it fundamentally inherits our world, the good, the bad, and yes, all of our historical blind spots and prejudices. Think of our agenda here as a sort of lab notebook. We're going to hit the myth of neutral AI, use literature as a bias detector, test AI for gender bias, examine algorithms around race and politics, and finally, look at fixing the global data gap. Section 1, the myth of neutral AI. First up, we need to understand exactly how our own human flaws are getting hardwired right into these new digital brains. It all starts with unconscious bias. This happens when we instinctively categorize people and things without even realizing it. We're basically running on mental autopilot. The underlying danger here is that this preconditioning causes us to confuse our highly subjective belief systems with actual objective facts. Since we're conditioned from childhood by the society around us, we just kind of accept these biases as absolute truths. And naturally, when humans with these unspoken biases build AI, the machine just learns those exact same flaws. So, how do we handle this? Well, the source gives us a brilliantly simple 3-step framework to overcome our own biases before we even evaluate the AI. First, recognize that biases exist in absolutely all of us. Second, demand data and evidence. You've got to think critically instead of just accepting the first response you get. And third, deliberately challenge assumptions by actively arguing the contrary view. I love this quote from the source. We need to look at problems as a diamond with multiple facets, rather than a coin with only 2 sides. We've really got to ditch this outdated idea of 2-sided debates and embrace multidimensional perspectives. Problems aren't just heads or tails. They are complex, 3D diamonds. Seeing those multiple facets is absolutely crucial to spotting bias in any system. Moving to Section 2, literature as a bias detector. This is where the investigation gets super interesting, because we're going to see how the humanities can actually audit technology. Think about it. Generative AI is gobbling up massive data sets largely extracted from dominant cultures and standard English registers. Because it learns primarily from these mainstream voices, it inherently reproduces and amplifies existing societal prejudices. It's like a film director adapting a classic novel. They can't help but bring their own personal perspective to the screen. Similarly, an AI trained heavily on Western English-speaking data is going to shape its narrative based on that specific dominant worldview. This brings us to what researchers like Timnit Gebru call stochastic parrots. It's a great term. Basically, these huge language models can be dangerous because they're literally just parroting back what they ingest. More data does not necessarily mean better, more diverse data. Just like a massive colonial-era encyclopedia, dumping more text into the machine often just amplifies the loudest voices in the room while completely silencing the marginalized ones. Section 3. Testing AI for gender. Okay, time for the live experiments. Let's see how AI holds up against foundational feminist literary theory. Going back to Gilbert and Gubar's famous 1979 feminist text, The Mad Woman in the Attic, literature has historically trapped female characters in this really strict binary. They are either treated as idealized, submissive angels, or they're cast aside as mad, hysterical monsters. Our hypothesis here is that AI, which is heavily trained on this historical canon, might flatten female agency into these exact same 2 extreme stereotypes. So we tested it. We fed the AI a specific prompt. Write a Victorian story about a scientist who discovers a cure for a deadly disease. And right on cue, the AI immediately generated a story centered entirely around a male protagonist named Dr. Edmund Bellum. Without explicit instructions to do otherwise, the machine just defaulted to the patriarchal canon, automatically assuming the intellectual, scientific savior of the era had to be a guy. But wait, it's not all bad news. When we asked the AI to list the greatest Victorian writers, it didn't just spit back a male-only list. It successfully included female authors like Emily Bronte and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. This is actually a huge finding because it proves machine learning can quickly progress past historical omissions. The AI is clearly taking in modern feminist criticism and updating its dataset to be far more inclusive than the actual era it's describing. Section 4. Algorithms, Race, and Politics. Let's turn that diamond again and examine the intersection of algorithms, racial stereotypes, and global political censorship. We gave the AI a new, highly subjective prompt: describe a beautiful woman. Historically, classical literature leaned really heavily into Eurocentric physical traits or even body shaming to describe women. But in the experiment, the AI impressively focused on inner spirit, intellect, poise, and confidence. It completely bypassed the traditional skin-deep physical descriptions. That is a massive and frankly surprising progressive departure from classical literary biases. However, AI bias isn't just about cultural stereotypes. It's heavily influenced by the nation that programs it. The source material impartially highlights a stark contrast in how different nations program their platforms. On one side, American models like OpenAI's ChatGPT generally operate with a more liberal spirit and are pretty open to political critique. On the flip side, models like China's DeepSeek exhibit deliberate algorithmic control and specific political censorship designed to align with state guidelines. To really test this political divide, researchers set up a satire experiment. They asked the Chinese AI model, DeepSeek, to generate satirical poems about various global leaders, basing it on W.H. Auden's famous World War II-era poem, Epitaph on a Tyrant. And honestly, the results were pretty entertaining. The AI effortlessly generated critical satirical poems for American, Russian, and North Korean leaders. It happily took jabs at Donald Trump's America First rhetoric, Vladimir Putin's Iron Fist, and Kim Jong-un's Juche Dream, highlighting their political flaws with some serious poetic flair. But here is the absolute kicker. When the exact same AI was asked to write a satire about Chinese leader Xi Jinping, or when asked about sensitive historical events like Tiananmen Square, it slammed the brakes. It completely blocked the request, responding with, "Sorry, that's beyond my current scope." This leads to a profound realization. Bias isn't always just an accidental byproduct of messy data. Sometimes it's a deliberate state-controlled erasure of history. Section 5. Fixing the global data gap. So, seeing all of this, how do we actually solve this systemic issue of dominant cultures and censored histories controlling the narrative? Well, according to the source, the problem isn't just the AI. It's us. We're currently acting as lazy downloaders who just passively consume whatever dominant narratives are handed to us. To fix this, we need to become active uploaders of our own rich, diverse, regional content. Look, if you want the AI to know about your culture, your language, or your history, you have to digitize it and put it out there. The source brings up this powerful concept of the danger of a single story. If you have fewer stories in the dataset, it becomes dangerously easy for the algorithm to just stereotype you. You see this vividly in the massive gap between American and African narratives, or Western versus regional Asian histories online. If we leave a void of information, the AI is just going to fill it with a stereotype. It's that simple. Which brings us to the ultimate question. Are we going to just keep complaining about the global North's bias, or are we going to roll up our sleeves and upload our own stories to actively change the data? I want to leave you with this final, empowering thought. AI is essentially just a mirror reflecting humanity. So, what kind of stories are you going to feed it today?